Who dat, everybody, and welcome into Who Dat Confessional podcast. We missed the other night. Apologies. Been some issues with family, but it's all good. We are back. We're going to try to give you an idea of what I think will happen this upcoming Sunday. Get y'all's thoughts, and then, of course, go over the injury report and everything else. And be a sounding board, because I know some of you are going to like what we have to say, which is that go ahead and prepare yourself. Dennis Allen going to be here next week. Love y'all, though. I really do. I really do love you, but I got to tell you the truth. Get ready. You got at least one more year. One more year. Sometimes it can be a positive. Sometimes it's a negative. If it's your favorite president, maybe you're happy. If it's your least favorite head coach, maybe you're sad. Well, one more year. Let's go ahead and say that. Who dat to everybody? Appreciate y'all being here. I ain't telling you jokes, T5. I'm just being honest. I'm like, you think I'm joking. You think I'm joking. But I'm being for real. Prepare for one more year. I'm letting you know. I'm letting you know. I'm letting you K-N-O-E. That's no. But, sorry, King T. I keep it real. That doesn't mean Pete might not be here, but DA gonna be here. Prepare thyself. Who dat to Sunblood 3 times? Solar Flares. Can you block out the sun? You block us. What's some names in this chat tonight? Paul Parker, Mr. Jerry, Edwin, AJ Gaines, Taylor, Babineau, Randall. Good to see you. Stop sunshine pumping. Bro, ain't nobody pumping no sunshine. If that's sunshine to you, brother, then whoo, you've been going through it rough. Imagine coming through whatever torments that you have been suffering with and seeing the New Orleans Saints led by Dennis Allen going, oh my God, sunshine finally breaking through my cloudy days. If that is your sunshine, sir, then I just want to say some prayers for you before we even get started on this show. Randall, Troy, Jefferson, King T, AJ Gaines again, Mr. Jerry, T5 the Great, Eric Howard, everybody, who dat to you, God bless. Welcome on in. We're going to go through the injury report to start off with. Your New Orleans Saints injury report, a little bit longer than you would like it to be. Isaiah Foskey, Kendre Miller, and Chris Olave are all DNP, both today and yesterday. Could be doubtful to see Chris Olave on the field. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Kendre Miller is still dealing with that ankle injury. But good news, Andres Pete back to full participation after suffering with an illness. Taysom Hill is limited. Cameron Jordan limited. Rashid Shaheed limited. Ryan Ramczyk is back to full, and Jamal Williams, dealing with a slight groin injury, is limited. Now, over on the New York Giants side, Cordell Flott, limited. Dexter Lawrence, probably the biggest name any of you will be familiar with, at least on the defensive side of the ball for the Giants, limited. Evan Neal at tackle, limited. Azeez Ojulari. Sound familiar? Yeah, well, Ojulari should be familiar if you're a Saints fan. But anyway, he's full. Sean Robinson, another one of the D linemen that many of you probably know, hamstring knee injury, limited. They got Paris Campbell, wide receiver. Again, another name many of you might know. He's back to full. And then Isaiah Simmons and Darren Waller were limited, returning or currently on the IR list and working to return. So their injury list not as long as New Orleans. They also didn't have any DNPs. So expect to pretty much see everybody starting for the Giants that isn't on IR. Probably. I mean, I guess limited on Thursday could be a sign of, hey, probably not going to see you. But realistically, just to see the Giants and know that you're going to go against their current starters. Now, for those that don't know who is unavailable for the Giants, because they have had a couple people on the list of like, hey, you're hurt, you can't work, it's okay. Daniel Jones being one of them. They also, kicker Graham Gano. I mean, some names that y'all would probably know on the IR list. But for the most part, I don't think you're missing much without Daniel Jones, except a very, very expensive quarterback. And, yeah, this is going to be a tough one. I said that my opinion of the New Orleans Saints would not be altered regardless of how they won against Carolina. That hasn't changed. So I look at this game as a game to actually make a level of statement. Now, I say a level of statement as a measured response simply because the New Orleans Saints are still going against a team that is not that good. The New York Giants are a 5-8 team. So it's not like the Giants are a good football team, right? Danny DeVito leading them at quarterback, coming in, making everybody forget about how terrible, or at least maybe even notice how terrible Daniel Jones is, because he's come in. Mr. Danny DeVito. It's not Danny DeVito, it's Tommy DeVito. But I'm going to call him Danny DeVito because, one, he is kind of short, and two, it's hilarious. But the Giants are 3-1 with him starting. For those who didn't know, with Tyrod Taylor and Daniel Jones combined, they are 2-7 this year. 3-1 with Danny DeVito at quarterback, who's throwing 66%, 8 TDs to only 3 interceptions. He has a completion percentage, 66%, but TD percentage of 6.3, which had he been playing the entire season, and that was around the same number, he'd be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, this is a 4-game small sample, right? But he's definitely come out putting on numbers, and because of that, you've been seeing them put in wins. So over the past 3 games, including a bye week, so they literally have not lost a game in over a month. This is a New York Giants team that is important for the New Orleans Saints to win because this is a statement game for New Orleans against a team that's not going to make the playoffs. It's very, very unlikely that the New York Giants make the playoffs because they have to do it through the wild card, right? They're not going to win their division. That division is clearly going to Philly, maybe Dallas, but I still say Philly. But they're not going to make it to the wild card. So if they won out, they win their final 4 games, it's a maybe that they could do it, but they've also got to play Philly one more time. Oh, and then they got to play Philly another time after that. So they got to play Philly twice, New Orleans and the Rams. So unlikely that New York runs the table. So they're not going to make the playoffs. But all of that said, they're still a team that's clearly trending in the right direction, having won 3 of their last 3 games against the Commanders, the Patriots, and the Packers. Now, the Packers, obviously a team kind of floating in the middle like New Orleans has been, like New York is, and Washington also not necessarily an amazing team, but wins are wins. And it's not like New Orleans has been a juggernaut that can be relied upon. So you've got a streaking in a positive direction Giants team that's, again, not very, very unlikely going to make the playoffs, but is certainly playing at a high level at the right point in the season. I mean, had they not started off like 1-5, the Giants might be a team that you're talking about being a playoff contender right now, but they start off 1-5. It's really tough to recover from that. And regardless of how good Danny DeVito ends up being for them, Daniel Jones still probably going to be their starting quarterback next year. And maybe they have a little bit of controversy, but considering the amount of money that Daniel Jones is getting paid, Danny DeVito could continue out the rest of the season and look amazing, and he's still probably not going to have a starting spot. Maybe he turns into trade bait, but they are committed to Daniel Jones. Man, I say this with like no trying to boost up Derek Carr's play, but you want to talk about quarterbacks, contracts that are undeserving, stupid, and a complete just bewilderment of money. Daniel Jones' literal 4-year, $40 million a year contract is redonk, and $92 million of that was guaranteed. Like, how is a quarterback that mid make that much? Like, we talk about it. Derek Carr's not making that much in terms of like yearly average of it. He's like 13th. They literally came out the gate and said, Daniel Carr, basically, we're giving you this big old contract. That would still been mind-blowing to me. So no matter how Mr. Danny DeVito does, or Tommy DeVito, we'll still call him Danny because it's hilarious. Man's going to be looking for a job. Hey, maybe he can help quarterback the New Orleans Saints next year. Oh, wait. Saints are also tied into a quarterback contract that probably isn't going anywhere. Oh, well. It be what it be. It be what it be. Godfather says the only statement we're going to make is an eviction notice for DA and Loomis. I predict Waller, Barkley, and Hyatt to go off. Also predict Carr turn the ball over at least twice. Giants 34, Saints 13. A little bit early for our predictions, but appreciate throwing it in there. I would say this. The only person with a more secure job in Louisiana than me, because I'm a content creator and I own my own LLC, is Mickey Loomis. I don't really know what that man could do to lose his job. I really don't. I'm sorry. I don't see Miss Gail firing Mickey Loomis. So Mickey ain't going nowhere. I don't think DA is going anywhere, to be honest. Pete is a maybe. And as sad as that truth might be, that's a maybe. But we'll see. Joseph says Pete saying he needs to be more aggressive means more untimely trick plays. Maybe. Let's talk about this upcoming game, though, right? The number one threat that you need to worry about if you're the New Orleans Saints, I guess I'll give you the number 2 threats. We'll give you number 1 and number 2. The number 1 is Darren Waller. Even at 400 years old, Darren Waller is number 1 of if he plays, as in if he comes back and plays, because he is on IR, but practicing. So if he's activated to play, dang it. Oh my gosh. If he's activated to play, dang it. He's the number one concern for me. Now, he's not played for them since October 22nd, I think. So he's coming at the end of the amount of time that you have to be on IR at least, but hasn't played in a bit. But he had I remember watching the Washington game earlier this year, New York, Washington. He had like a 100-yard game and a TD, and it screams destroy the New Orleans Saints. So if you're wanting the New Orleans Saints to win, which many of you still are, something to worry about. Now, he is technically not reactivated yet, but he is practicing, and he's in that period where they have 2 weeks to decide. And if he gets activated, that's number one that you want to worry about. Now, if you don't see him, that would still mean Daniel Bellinger is going to be there, the young tight end that they have. But that's number one. And then on the opposite side of that, you've got Saquon Barkley, who, when healthy, Saquon Barkley is arguably the best running back in the NFL in terms of total running back, as in does it all. He can receive at the backfield. He can run as well as anybody else. The only drawback is he plays for the New York Giants, and the only drawback is he generally doesn't play a full season. Everybody knows about the 2020 year that he missed, getting injured at the end of 2019, and obviously having injuries this year. So he's played in the league for 6 years, but at the same time, he's only played 70 games. So, yeah, we'll see how that ends up happening or how that ends up playing out. But that's, as you can know, if you've been watching the New Orleans Saints lately, a struggle has been rush yards. And the New Orleans Saints, over the past 3 games, this is a just disgusting number I'm about to give you. But prepare yourself. Over the past 3 games, the New Orleans Saints have given up over 560 yards of rushing. Those that don't know, that's a lot in a 3-game period. If you weren't aware, that's a lot in 3 games. Yeah. By comparison, the first 3 games of the year, the New Orleans Saints gave up 299 yards over 3 games. And we were talking about like, wow, this rush defense isn't that great. That was against Tennessee, Carolina, and Green Bay. Against the Falcons, Lions, and Panthers, they've given up a combined 560 or 570. No, 574 yards. Good Lord. Math is painful and rough. So, that's got to be number one on your list of things to go holy crap about. Now, is there a weakness, if you will, in this Giants team? Well, actually, yeah, there is. Number one, they don't score many points. Even in their win streak lately, the New York Giants have not been the biggest scorers in the league. Against Green Bay, they scored 24 points. When they beat New England, they only scored 10 points. Now, when they beat the Commanders, they scored 31 points. But this team has actually only scored more than 20 points 3 times the entire season. They do not score a ton of points. This is not an offense that blows it up. Now, again, I will say, as I said at the beginning, that over the past 3 games, this is a team that has picked up in the right direction. All thanks to Tommy DeVito, who is basically this year's Brock Purdy for a much worse coaching staff and team. He didn't get the Shanahan just system laid out in front of him to benefit from. So that is something to keep in mind. Also, defensively, we talk about the New Orleans Saints struggles. Well, this is also a defense in New York that is not very good. They give up a lot of points. They do not force a ton of turnovers, though they have been lately. They start off the first 4 games of the season, didn't force a single turnover. Over the past 3 games, they have a combined 12 forced turnovers. So, big numbers, be on the lookout for that. Again, this is a team surging in the right direction. So, we'll see if that ends up playing. But this is a team that looks a lot different than what they have all year. But even then, still, defensively, they have struggled. And against Dallas, which is their last loss, they gave up over 640 yards from scrimmage. So again, this is a defense that is struggling. They can win, as they've shown. They've won 3 games in a row, and that has to mean something. And I don't care about the arguments about competition because, well, they still beat the Ron Rivera-led Commanders, and the New Orleans Saints beat the Carolina Panthers led by interim coach. So if we're really trying to like get measuring sticks out, nobody's bragging about anything, but they're trending in the right direction. And if New Orleans really wants to win this division, you've got to beat this team, because not only is it a win to help push you kind of further up the division, it's also a conference game. And the New Orleans Saints have actually struggled with conference games. And you talk about tie-breaking systems, they need to win more games against the conference. So win against NFC opponents. And this will bring them back to 500, with this week also being the big week for maybe getting a little bit of help around the league, with the Green Bay Packers playing the Buccaneers. Bucs are 6-7, just like the New Orleans Saints. Packers are the home team, though. And then you got the Falcons going to Carolina. I realize that Carolina is a 1-12 team, but divisional games are divisional games, and they've played some pretty tough games here lately. So we shall have to wait and see. Now, Godfather Azzel Waller even said he targeted us as his first game back, rubbing his hands and licking his lips, looking at our D versus tight ends. Possibly. Yeah. We'll see. Again, it has not been officially activated, but that is why I brought up in today's show. I did want to bring up, hey, this is one to watch, because that could definitely hurt New Orleans in a very bad way. Right? So just depends on what side of that fence you're on. With me, I'm just trying to let y'all know what to be expected, or what to be expected. So just trying to express that in the best way. Paul says Loomis needs to step down. He's messed his team up salary-wise for years to come, along with drafting bad and paying players he should let walk. I don't know who that you would put on the playing and should let walk. And honestly, I think the New Orleans Saints drafts lately have been very good. There's definitely a narrative going around that the Saints have had bad drafts, but I don't agree with that. I think the only thing the Saints have really struggled with draft-wise is Dennis Allen has been handpicking the first round picks. He's been going after a specific DN type. You look at the New Orleans Saints draft, I don't feel like the New Orleans Saints are struggling with the draft. That's also not really something that Loomis like manually runs and like handles, but even if it was, I don't feel like the Saints have had a bad set of drafts for the past few years. Now, are they 2017 level good? No. Chris Olave is definitely not a bad draft pick from last year. Neither was Alontae Taylor. And then you didn't have a 3rd and 4th round pick last year. And then the year before that, it was Peyton Turner, who injury. Again, I just said freaking Dennis Allen. But Pete Warner's been a very good player coming in the 2nd round. Paulson Debo in the 3rd was fantastic. Sure, Ian Book was stupid, but blame that one on Sean Payton, if you will. Landon Young has been a rotational backup as a 6th rounder, and meh, right? So I wouldn't say the Saints have like struggled the past 3 years of drafting. I just think that it's been very annoying that the 1st round guys that Dennis Allen keeps going after for his prototype, or even in this case, 2nd round with Isaiah Foskey, Peyton Turner, Marcus Davenport, they're just not working out. But I wouldn't say that the draft has been a problem with New Orleans. I would be fair that, I think that there comes a time where even somebody who's good at their job, that diminishes, and I look at like Bill Belichick over in New England. Bill Belichick, in my opinion, is the greatest head coach of all time, period. You can't convince me there's a better head coach that has ever existed. That's just my opinion. Bill Belichick is number one. He's the best head coach to ever exist. That doesn't mean that Bill Belichick in 2023 is the best head coach in the NFL or even in the top 5. I think Bill Belichick's best time is behind him. And that's okay. That's completely okay. But I think his best time is behind him. And for those that don't know the history of Belichick, it's not like Belichick just, had success with Tom Brady. I mean, Bill Belichick invented the match system for defenses. Like, that's him and Nick Saban designed that in the 90s in Cleveland. They put that together. I mean, so he did a lot for the game of football that led to a lot of success. We talk about Tom Brady's success. Well, the reason New England for basically 2 decades under Bill Belichick had a fantastic defense. And eventually everybody ends up, there's somebody that gets better at you at your job. That just happens. So I don't think Bill Belichick's great anymore. But there was a point where he was. He's also like 72 years old. So I just think that Loomis has kind of hit that point. Like, I think there was a time where Loomis, arguably one of the best GMs in the league, maybe it's changed. And you've been raising up guys in the facility to take that role. Kai Harley. Technically, Fontenot, who went to Atlanta, was being raised the same way. So you also have Jeff Ireland here. I think that we get a little bit distracted from previewing the Giants game, but what I would love to see happen is basically Mickey just takes the role as president/vice president of their little sports conglomerate here, Stop playing general manager, give it to one of the young guys, and you start that process in a new direction. That's what I'd love to see the New Orleans Saints actually do. So, because I don't really have a problem with how New Orleans operates the salary cap. I really don't have an issue with it. You know, it doesn't hurt them except for, random COVID years that come up and destroy the salary cap for that 1 year. Is it more difficult to work with? Absolutely. You'd be a fool to argue against that point, but I don't have an issue with it. I just have an issue with some of the other things. I don't like I don't like that we're probably going to stick with DA for 3 years. I mean, maybe he gets fired in his third year, but like DA's still going to be here. But anyway, back to our topic of points. Jay says, I feel like we were all groaning about the cap way back in 2013, how we were mortgaging our future, yet every year it seems they find ways to keep things relatively managed. Exactly. Is the way New Orleans handles the caps, focusing on things like restructures and extensions and ghost years to manipulate the cap in a way to allow them to basically sign whoever they want any given year. Can it be like annoying? Absolutely. Can it be problematic or more difficult to handle? Absolutely. Is it a completely effective system? They've been doing it for 2 decades. I mean, I remember when the New Orleans Saints had the worst salary cap position in the NFL and then signed Jarvis Byrd to the highest safety contract to have ever been signed up until that point. It doesn't bother me how they handle it because Kai Harley, should he take over, probably going to do the same thing, right? It's whatever. But what is important is, are you winning football games? And I don't think the method is preventing them from winning football games. I think the coaching staff is preventing them from winning football games. But we'll see how that ends up playing out. Again, this is a Giants team that is surging in the right direction, whereas at least they're building some level of identity. New Orleans just kind of hasn't had anything all season. And it sucks, but it's true. Now, how has the defense for them been recently? I would actually argue that it hasn't changed too much. I just think they're playing as a better unit, that being the Giants. I feel like the Giants are just simply playing better football as a group. Maybe simply simplifying things because you had to change your quarterback is part of that. But, defensively, over their past 5 games, they've given up 320 plus yards 4 times. Like the only game they did not give up over 300 yards was the New England Patriots game, and they won that 10-7. So, yeah, I mean, Rubber says, I think about the players they didn't pay, Trey, Von Bell. Well, they were never going to pay Trey Hendrickson, and it wasn't that they couldn't. So that wasn't a thing. They let Marcus Williams walk, but then signed Honey Badger. So, again, it wasn't about money on either one of those. Now, we can make that being a decision and say we disagree with the decision, but Mickey Loomis is just right in making the contracts. So it wasn't like he shorted the Saints on money. If you want to go blame anybody, go blame Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen did not want to give Marcus Williams a top contract. Dennis Allen said, hey, we can work with this and we can go after and do something else. We're fine. Trey Hendrickson was let walk because he wasn't a complete player, and Dennis Allen wanted to run with a complete player and a complete prototype to his defense in Marcus Davenport. They could have signed Trey Hendrickson. They had the ability to do it if they wanted to. The team said, no, that doesn't fit what we want. So they moved on from it. Now, we could definitely get it on to people's about those type of decisions. But all point is, like, the style of how he does GMing has not prevented the New Orleans Saints from keeping players. They've decided to say, we're not keeping you. Now, that's been some stupid decisions, in my opinion. I think letting a guy who is getting 10 plus sacks, regardless of whether or not he's a complete player, just walk is stupid, especially when you're banking on a guy who has not played a full season to be good. Now, in fairness, if we want to play devil's advocate here, just like for a brief moment, I can already feel Godfather like just beaming into my soul. If you remember, the year after they let Trey walk in 2019, you started to see Davenport like pick it up. Like it was like, oh, okay, maybe this is a good idea. What was that year? What was it? 2020 maybe, or 2021, where Davenport had 9 sacks, right? It looked like, okay, we lost Trey, but at least we're moving in the right direction. Maybe it was 2021. Yeah, I think it was 2021. He had that 9-sack season. I'm like, okay, we're finally seeing it. Now it makes sense. And then, of course, it all fell apart, right? It fell apart. But yeah, I mean, that was just a decision they made based on the style of player. Because even to this day, and I'm not throwing shade at Trey Hendrickson, because Trey Hendrickson is I would argue, elite at what he's doing. Trey Henderson, even today, is not a complete football player. Like, he is not as good against the run as he is against the pass. If you're Cincy, you don't give a damn because he's already recorded in 3 years 36 sacks for Cincinnati. They're happy with how things are going. But he's still not a complete player now. Like, he is not an elite edge defender. He's an elite pass rusher. And if you're New Orleans, you're kicking yourself because you kind of have no pass rushers right now. So, obviously, New Orleans lost that gamble, right? Lost that gamble. Then Famous has traded Gardner-Johnson for a spare tire. Truth is, Famous, well, that's the only option they had. They were getting rid of Gardner-Johnson no matter what. So they took what they could get. And that's just the dirty truth of it, because when NFL teams know a guy is going, it's blood in the water, man. Because players talk and drama travels in the league faster than it does on Twitter. Teams knew that man's getting out no matter what. So they lowballed the hell out of New Orleans. New Orleans took what they could get. And that's just the sucky truth of the Gardner-Johnson situation. CJGJ ran his mouth and put himself in position to not make that money in New Orleans, and they weren't going to give it to him anyway. But he forced that situation to happen. Whether it's right or wrong, that's for him to decide on himself. But Mickey just got what he could get, and nobody's going to give them anything knowing that they're tossing him. So now, again, I think the blame of why certain things happen go back to other reasons. Like, I said it a few weeks ago, and I'm not trying to rabbit hole down this because we kind of talked about this all year. And I do want to make sure we focus on the Giants game, which is certainly a game they have to win. But I talked about coaches that can handle certain types of personalities, like Michael Thomas's and stuff. I don't think DA is one of those type of coaches. So I don't think that he can handle a CJGJ. I don't think he can. But at the same time, neither could the Super Bowl attending Philadelphia Eagles. And they let him go too. Now, he's apparently found a good home. Back with Dan Campbell. Technically not back, but, with Dan Campbell up in Detroit. He's played 2 games. So, there it is. There it is. Because if I gripe too much, well, I've got to extend that same gripe to Philly. And Philly is literally the team that was just in the Super Bowl and very much might be a team this year that's in the Super Bowl. And they also said, yes, CJ is not worth the trouble. Dump him. So, yeah, I don't know if I can even get mad at Loomis or DA over Chauncey. I think Chauncey's the one digging his own bed, right? And I think he's gotten humbled a little bit this year because he can only play in 2 games because he hasn't played since, September? So Chauncey's got humbled a little bit. I do agree that he had the dog in him, and that's good. But a dog that isn't, trained right, I don't really like talking about players as trained dogs. But anyway, you get my point. One that doesn't have proper leadership and direction, see how it goes. But if the Saints don't fire DA, I'm not renewing my season tickets. Ball's in your court, Gail. Randall, I understand that. But they don't listen to this podcast. I don't know who you're talking to. How about this, Randall? You keep your season tickets and just give them to Rev. There you go. That way you don't lose your spot for when they do fire DA after next year, and that way you can keep them. So just pay for the tickets next year. Give them to all of us here at Who Dat Confessional. We'll attend. We'll give them out to people in the audience. And then when they do finally fire DA, you won't have lost your spot and trying to get back your tickets. That sounds like a great plan to me, Randall. That sounds like a better plan. Instead of canceling, just, write it off as charity next year. Give it to all of us here at Who Dat Confessional. We'll give it out to the fans. That way you won't lose your spot. You won't lose your spot. There you go. Oh, man. As far as the New Orleans Saints against the New York Giants go, though, the number 2 names, that are the 2 names that I'm watching the most, are definitely Saquon Barkley and Waller. Even though he's not officially returned from IR yet, he's the one that I worry about them taking advantage of. I really do. I really worry about New Orleans giving up more rushing and tight end yards. I mean, because honestly, the DBs have done really good against wide receivers. They really have. I mean, The New Orleans Saints are doing very well defensively in that one specific category. As in, if you look at the quarterback ratings and you look at the turnover numbers, everything, the New Orleans Saints defensive DBs are giving up, just specifically the corners. They're doing fantastic, man. It sucks. It's one of the best corner rooms I've ever seen in my life. Paulson Debo, 54 quarterback rating when targeted. Isaac Yiadom, 64 quarterback rating when targeted. Marshawn Lattimore, 74 quarterback rating when targeted. Alontae Taylor, 85 quarterback rating when targeted. Like, we're going into like just the long list of corners. Everybody's playing well, but it's that inside that's really getting burned bad, right? It's that inside set that's getting hurt, you know. That's where New Orleans is really struggle busting. That's where New Orleans is struggle busting. So, yeah. And they have played terrible quarterbacks, Rubber, but at the same time, you play who's on your schedule, right? And that goes for every team. You play who's on your schedule. So, you play who's on your schedule. Lante on athletic tight ends got to be 153.8. Look, playing slot's tough. I mean, if you remember, we were just talking about Chauncey. He also had his struggles, and this is Alante's first year doing the slot. I think New Orleans has got a good 3 years of elite corner play that they can bake on. And there is not a lot that this defense can bake on long term. Their defensive line has nothing to bank on long term because as much as I like Carl Granderson, he still is not a 10-sack guy. I mean, he's 6.5, and maybe he makes 10 this year. I really do. I have been, hoping for him to have success. But truthfully, you don't know, and there's nobody to replace Cam right now. You can't be confident in Peyton Turner and Isaiah Foskey. And as much as I like Brian Brzee, you still got to see that pop off. So, yeah, I mean, it's the DB room is really the only, and specifically the corner rooms, the only places you can be semi-confident about what this team has right now. But, I don't judge Alontae Taylor too harshly about playing in the slot. And hopefully Darren Waller coming off, if he does end up getting activated off IR, will actually be gosh, I probably shouldn't say it because I'm gonna put like such bad juju in the air. But of the tight ends that New Orleans has faced, Waller would be the easiest one for Alontae Taylor to defend. Because at this point in his career, he's 31, he's coming off injury. He is not the biggest or fastest tight end they have faced. Now, he does have length and height. He is 6'6". That's not going anywhere. But Darren Waller's like a 235, but he doesn't have elite speed anymore. He's not Darren Waller of like 5 years ago who was getting 1,000 yards receiving, right? So Alontae Taylor hopefully has an easier job this week versus, like against the Lions, where Laporta is arguably playing at the, top 3 in his position this year. But it is still something I'm concerned about. And then the Saquon Barkley one is the biggest one because I don't trust any of the Saints linebackers to cover him out of the backfield. And then the Saints run defense has become so porous that you worry that Saquon is just going to go off. And when Saquon is having a really good day, it's no coincidence that those are typically the days that New York does really well as a whole. And they've done a really good job of getting him Alvin Kamara-like touches during their win streak. What I mean by that is he hasn't, like, against the Jets, like a month and a half ago, I remember he had like 36 carries, something stupid. Well, I think that is a very high number. That's the exact amount of rushes he's had over the past 3 games total. But he's also getting receptions. He's scoring touchdowns. So they're getting him in the end zone and they're getting him touches because over the past 3 games, he has 4 touchdowns. But they're doing it in a much more paced type way like you would use Alvin Kamara, which has kept him a little bit healthier, has also made him have more of those explosive plays that he became so known for. So with New Orleans being porous at best defensively right now, their run defense is just getting worse and worse. The ranking of their run defense is getting worse and worse. You would hope that this hopefully gives them some reprieve. They focus on Barkley and they can shut him out, but it's just been so bad, man. It's really not trying to be negative. This team has just been such a not Great team. It's just, they haven't been terrible, but they've just not played well. For those curious where the Saints currently rank rushing defense, just to give you an update, they are 26 in yards allowed, 25th in attempts allowed. So, I mean, you run on them, you've been successful. So, you run on them, they've been successful. Well, let's keep it moving. Imagine giving the Eagles our first-round pick, and then they beat us by 50 in the Dome. Yikes. Let's not. Nope. Loomis will trade Lattimore to Philly or the Niners for a fifth-round pick and a stick of zebra stripes chewing gum. I think Lattimore's one of the players that he wouldn't trade. But that's just me. We'll see. Player that we haven't managed to replace is Armstead. Yeah. And again, that was a horrible gamble and bet, saying we're going to draft a guy with great potential, but before he's ready to go, we're just going to ship off Teron. Big miss. I disagreed with both of those decisions, both that and the Williams decisions pretty heavily. I've argued that obviously this year we could obviously have used Trey Hendrickson's 10 sacks, but I've argued for a couple years that the New Orleans Saints' biggest, most egregious miss was letting Williams go. No offense, Honey Badger, but I feel like that really hurt this team. But losing Armstead and then just going, yeah, we're going to take this really raw prospect and it's all good. It ain't all good, bro. It's not all good at all. Trevor Penning is not even starting. And yeah, anyway. I don't think Loomis trades anybody. He thinks every season is Super Bowl season, so he's not trying to retool in a big way. I hopefully think that changes this year, but maybe I'm just being too positive. So, Olave just got that presidential Rolex he was fixing to play Sunday. Yeah, I mean, Derek Carr did get Chris Olave a Rolex and all that, and that's fine and all, but that wouldn't mean a damn thing to me if I was a player. And then he got all the offensive linemen, grills and steak. Like, come on, Derek Carr. Like, at least adopt like some New Orleans culture, like a little bit. Anyway, whatever. Oh man, you think May is a replacement, not Honey Badger? Technically, Honey Badger is kind of because Honey Badger plays a mixed role, so he'll play that Malcolm Jenkins strong safety role of what you saw Jenkins playing at the end of his career here in New Orleans, his second stint here. But he also plays, like when they'll play like cover three, he'll play the robber role and crash down the middle of the field. So he plays a mix of free safety role / I mean, they basically asked May and Honey Badger to do multiple things. But you are right that Marcus May is the more traditional free safety in the New Orleans Saints defense. The issue was more of pointing out that Marcus Williams left for a big contract, and then the Saints went and signed Honey Badger to a decent-sized contract. It was just more of a, they can afford to do this if they wanted to. They just chose not to. They chose to go in a different direction. He does play a slightly different role, but, you know, when you sign a guy to a contract that was like, what, $20 million guaranteed, and I think it was like $28.3 million over 3 years, you're basically paying the man $10 million a year. You could have thrown in a couple more million and then kept Marcus Williams if you had wanted to. DA didn't want to. So we can move on, go for basically a cheaper veteran and be perfectly fine. Marcus Williams is making $14 a year right now, but he also signed a like 6-year contract. So yeah, is what it is. Is what it is. Now, I poking holes in the Christmas gifts. I mean, I just don't think the players really cared, to be honest with you. I mean, would I like to have a Rolex? Yeah, so my broke ass could go back and sell it and have some money for Christmas. But do I think that him buying the team chains and Rolexes changes how people feel about this team right now? No. No, I don't. You take his 35.5 sacks over Williams, what he's doing for the Ravens? Yeah, that's fair. I mean, also, one thing about T-Rex, shout out to T-Rex, he's been healthy. Williams has not been healthy. So if you choose Marcus Williams, that's fine. For me, it was all about the fit. And the sad truth of it is T-Rex does not fit what DA wants to do. Now, basic logic is change what you want to do then because T-Rex is too good of a player. And completely fair rebuttal, by the way. Absolutely fair rebuttal. But Marcus Williams just fit this defense perfectly. Trey Henderson didn't, so you probably could have decided like, hey, maybe we should find a way to keep this guy who got 13 and a half sacks his first year as a starter. But anyway, they decided not to. They opted to do something different. But yeah, that's I'm fine with that logic. The only problem I would say is you worry about this team now being struggling against the run, and that's with them having Carl Granderson at the end, and just he's much better than Trey Henderson showed. And they already struggle against the run. So I guess just pick your poison of what you value. If you value pass rush that much, and there's that wrong with valuing it that much. If you value pass rush that much, Trey Henderson will always be the choice to make. So, yeah. Williams missed tackle in Minnesota. It was a horrible attempt tackle. You're okay with that? See, I'm not going to blame a man for rookie year missing a tackle. That's not going to be a thing. Very few safeties can operate and run a quarters coverage like he could, or a cover 3 match. I mean, he was just too good with that. No. And yeah, dark side. It's bah humbug on Christmas gifts, because Carr does not have a great reputation in New Orleans right now. He doesn't have a great reputation in the locker room. And I just don't think, spending big money on Rolex is going to change anything. He needs to play better on the field, and that'll change things. But you can throw around your money all you want. That'll really work around in New Orleans. It might work on other teams. It just ain't going to work here. So, for offense could sustain drives, our defense would be okay. Just have to get chances to rest instead of 3. Now it's back in. I don't really think that's been the defensive problem, honestly. I think the defense is struggling against specific things. And they have not found a way to stop that, and more teams are taking advantage of it. I really don't think it's the offense sucking that has hurt the Saints defense. I don't. Now, the Saints defense has helped itself by creating a lot of turnovers, and they've done that a lot this year. So shout out to them for doing that. But I don't think that that's their problem. I think their problem is they have sections of their team and their system that sucks. And until they make that stop sucking, they're going to continue to have people focus on that. I think that's their issue, right? They don't have a pass rush. They really struggle against the run when they're not in a pure base alignment. But when you put them in a pure base alignment, they then can't cover the Y or the inside guy, whether that's a slot receiver or a tight end. So they have pass rush problems. They have run defense problems. And then when they try to alter their defense to try to compensate for the run defense problems, they then are liabilities in the short, medium pass area. And that's just what teams keep taking advantage of. That's what teams focus on when playing New Orleans. It's also why this defense doesn't give up a lot of touchdowns, because when you shorten the field and you take away all that extra space, the Saints defense is pretty good at clamping down. But they have some egregious problems. They really struggle to close out drives because they don't have much of a pass rush. They really struggle to create consistent shorter drives because they can't consistently stop the run. And they have to do constant adjustments to make up for how teams are fighting them, which is why they can make you go 3 and out, and then they give up an 85-yard drive. They have some very clear issues with their defense. But I don't really think that the offense is the problem there. I mean, could the offense help the defense by actually scoring consistently? Absolutely. But is the offense being suck preventing that defense from doing anything? I honestly don't think it is. I think it's that we're finally seeing the defense do what we've been worried about, which is the defense is starting to age out at critical positions. I love Cameron Jordan, but there's only 4 games left, man. And he would have to go on an absolute tear to keep his NFL record 7.5 sack season pace going. For those that don't know, that is a really cool thing about Cameron Jordan, is he has had, going all the way back to 2012, a minimum of 7.5 sacks every season for a decade. He's got 2 sacks this year. And unless he magically gets 5.5 over the last 4, that's going to end. So you just have run into a spot where you are devoid of talent at the moment. Now, I'm not going to say he's washed like Red does. I just think that Cameron Jordan is no longer the pass rush elite that he was, but Cameron Jordan is still a very good defensive end. He's just no longer elite. And there's a big difference there. Like, he still contributes extremely well in the run defense. He's very good in that. But he's no longer a 3-down guy. Like, if you were going to come in to rush the passer on 3rd down, you would, if you had somebody, replace Cameron Jordan for a pure pass rusher. Like, that's when you would bring in Trey Hendrickson. Like, hey, dude, we know you can't stop the run, but go tag Jordan out real quick and go get a sack. If they had that guy, now's the time you'd be swapping him in. You just don't have that guy, right? That doesn't exist. They don't have him. And you could maybe do like Red does and sliding him inside and run him with a NASCAR package and stuff. But even then, I just don't think that he's got that great initial burst and first step. He's still got his strength, but he doesn't have the play speed that he once does. And he's always about a half second short of a sack. And to give you a number that shows you this as proof of how well he's actually done this year in terms of pressure, here's the amount of pressures that he has. He has 5 less pressures than Carl Granderson, even though he has 4.5 less sacks than Carl Granderson. He still has a great play strength. He still has a fantastic moveset. He has just gotten about a half step slower. And that half step is the difference between getting sacks in the NFL and not getting sacks in the NFL. He's only got 5 less pressures according to SIS. So he's still there. He's just not able to complete the play on a sack anymore. Still does fantastic when it comes to other things. And there are definitely guys who have taken step backs in other ways. As much as I just praised Alontae Taylor, this dude has missed 11 tackles this season. He has a missed tackle rate of 16%. Like, Alontae Taylor is adjusting to a new position. And I do think that in coverage, he's been good. But also at the same time, holy crap, Alontae Taylor, you fundamentally have got to get better at tackling the football. That's been a struggle for him. In fact, the New Orleans Saints have 3 guys who have a missed tackle percentage of 10% or higher. That's a problem. So there's definitely issues in this defense. And all that said is the New York Giants that are coming, the one thing they don't have is an amazing wide receiver. At least in my opinion. If you disagree with that, feel free to shout out who you think is an amazing wide receiver. Because I don't feel like they have great wide receivers over there. I feel like they have got temporary guys who, can do some things, but Darius Slayton is okay at best. The Saints probably aren't going to struggle much with, Wendell Robinson and Darius Slayton. Jalen Hyatt. They're not going to struggle with those guys. Darren Waller, Saquon Barkley, that's something I definitely worry about. And where can that lead in terms of scoring? And that obviously could open up opportunities for Mr. Danny DeVito, and what he's been doing. And he's had, this will be his 7th game, but it'll be his 5th game as a starter, if I remember right. 6th game as a starter. 5th game? 6th game as a starter. So yeah, because he's 3-1 as a starter, or the team is 3-1, because we don't give credit to wins to quarterbacks. But he has not thrown an interception since the Dallas game. So he's had 3 straight games as a starter where he didn't throw an interception and he threw at least 68% completion. Now, at the same time, he's putting up very Derek Carr-like numbers in that he's not putting up big yards and he's not going downfield, right? Like last game against Green Bay, 158 yards, but he completed 80% of his passes. Against New England, only 191 yards, but he completed 68% of his passes. Big thing was, against Washington, he was sacked 9 times. Against New England, he was sacked 6 times. Last week, he wasn't sacked at all. So there's opportunity there if New Orleans can find a way to capitalize. But the big question is, can they actually capitalize? They've struggled with it so much, right? And over the past 2 games, Danny DeVito over here has had 2 TDs. Just 2. So he's played efficient Derek Carr type football. Just efficient. You can make efficient quarterbacks bad. Get to them. Every quarterback gets bad to a degree with pressure. Mid-tier quarterbacks get worse. So let's get to our score predictions. We had a couple post in. I know Godfather already threw his in, but I'll go ahead and repeat it because Godfather was very kind to help support this channel, and I do appreciate that. I don't always agree with Godfather's mentality, which is extremely negative. But at the same time, if he's going to support this podcast, and not a lot of people do, so big thank you out to him for doing that. We're at least going to read off his stuff. He says that the Giants win 34-13. TJ says 18-15 Giants. King Troll says 21-13 Giants. Would you say that Derek Carr is a top 20 quarterback this year? Ooh. Putting him around the 20 number, I'm okay with. But if you also said 24, I wouldn't argue with you. If you said 14, I'd argue with you. Putting him around 20, I could live with. That'd be about right. And again, Saints fans are going to freaking hate that. I don't think he's the worst quarterback in the NFL. I mean, the worst quarterback that is a starter that's getting paid stupid money is probably Daniel Jones, who is injured and not playing in this game. But where would I put Derek Carr? I mean, probably somewhere around 20 to 25, maybe 18 to 25. I mean, it just depends on, like, what are we really using here? Because I have always been very clear. I, personally, do not watch every quarterback in the league. I do not. I don't. That said, would I rather have Derek Carr than Mac Jones? Absolutely. Would I rather have Derek Carr than Desmond Ridder? Absolutely. Would I rather have Derek Carr than Zach Wilson? Absolutely. Joe Flacco? Absolutely. Kenny Pickett? Absolutely. Who else can I think of that I would rather have? I'd rather have him than Ryan Tannehill. Hell, Joe Flacco started a game last week. I'd rather have him than Joe Flacco. I'd rather have him than Daniel Jones. I'd rather have him than Gardner Minshew. Now, again, we're talking about bottom of the league, but then there's also Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud. I would take all those guys above Derek Carr. All of them. All of them. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence. I'd take all those guys. Tua, Jalen Hurts. I'd take all those guys above Derek Carr. But when you get to the bottom end of the league, yeah, there's a lot of people I'd take. All right, DJ says 27-24 Giants. AJ 24-17 Giants. Wow, everybody going Giants with this one. Let's see who else we got. Red says 26-23 Giants. Randall says 20-18 Giants. Now, finally, somebody picked the Saints to win. Big Smokey says 24-17 Saints. Jacob said 27-16 Saints. Demetrius says 27-21 Saints. And then Nikki DeFish coming in says the Saints players and coaches have been roasted by the fans and sports media both fairly and unfairly. That's a huge chip on all of their shoulders. Pride. Saints 27-17. Now, I've said this. One thing that the players have to their advantage is they are a very resilient locker room. Extremely resilient locker room. They do not give up. So I think that puts them in any game no matter what. Just like they were in the game for Detroit because of that. Right? I don't think it's going to be a blowout like Godfather had at 34-13. Darkside says 40-7. Yeah. Or 40-13 Saints. Yeah, dude. The Saints haven't scored 40 points in a long time. I don't see that. But I'm here for it. But I do think that this is a very resilient locker room. And I think this will be a closer, low-scoring game. I think the Saints could win this game, 24-20. Something like that. But I don't see them putting up 30+, even though they could. This Giants defense is not very good, but at the same time, this team is playing well as a unit over the past month. And how a team is playing recently matters a lot. With Bowden playing well, May is expendable. Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, Mike. You got a rookie DB playing at a pretty good level. Absolutely. The veteran on the block, especially because he ain't even healthy, FYI. But Marcus May, for those curious, there's actually an out for New Orleans after this year to get out of his contract. They actually had a built-in out, so don't be surprised if Marcus May is gone after this year. They had a built-in out for his third year. Yeah, he meant Howden, but I knew what he was talking about, King Troll. He said Bowden, which had been the receiver. I know he meant Howden. But, yeah, Marcus May is probably gone after this year. Caveat, we score 28+ if we use AK and Jimmy Graham. Here's the dirty of it, AJ. And this is why I made the video, the film study I did this week. You probably aren't going to see Jimmy Graham this week unless the man, the myth, the legend, P. Carmichael has changed and is actually going to start paying attention to what works. The only reason Jimmy Graham was even playing in last week's game is because you had Taysom Hill out. The only reason he was given the snaps that he was. The only reason. So, unless Pete's changed, don't expect to see Graham. So, yeah. Where's the built-in out to get out of DA's contract? See, the tricky thing with coaching contracts is typically coaching contracts are fully guaranteed, which is one reason that teams are so very hesitant to just get rid of coaches. There was an article about Sports Illustrated that came out sometime this year. It might have been last month. Talked about the subject if you're curious about it. But NFL coaches are different than like NBA coaches and NHL coaches because typically their contracts, very, very rarely I don't know if I can even name a coach that isn't like this. Their contracts are guaranteed. So if you sign a guy to 5 years, $50 million, you're paying him $50 million. Done. It's there. So you signed Dennis Allen to like a 4-year contract making, $32 million. That man's going to make $32 million. So there's like the best term, and I've used this term before. If y'all never heard about this term, you're going to learn about a term today. Sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't necessarily apply to this specifically. I mean, it does, but I'm speaking generally, is a term that defines you staying with a decision based on the amount of resources you've committed to it, regardless of how that decision is playing out. That decision will be playing out for you very, very poorly. But it doesn't matter because in your mind, you spent this amount of money on it, you're going to do it anyway. It'd be like having, a car and you continually repair that car because you're like, man, I bought this car for 20 grand and I've already repaired it for another 10. I'm not getting rid of it. I've spent 30 grand on this car. Instead of getting out of the car that clearly is costing you too much money, you keep it. Sunk cost fallacy. DA, part of that, man. I think one of the reasons that they look at him and go, even though this team's playing mediocre, we're going to give him a chance, is because you paid him 4 years, $32 million. So there's a sunk cost fallacy. Like, I'm paying him, I might as well let him work, even if he sucks. So, and let's look. Dennis Allen's contract is, 32 over 4. So he's going to make 32 no matter what. So you're sitting there going like, do I really get rid of him after 2 years and $16 million, or we see if third year works? Now, I will agree, TJ, for a head coach in 2024, that's not a lot of money. $8 million a year is not a lot. I'm just saying, you go tell millionaires to just get rid of $16 million. Saying. I'm just saying. We'll be back following the game Sunday. I love every one of y'all. Y'all are amazing. Who dat? God bless. We'll see you on the next one. Deuces, that's me. And film studies, hopefully, positive this upcoming week. Because I could use some positive film studies. It's been tough to follow the Saints when they've been rough. I prefer them when they're good.